afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Jim Rogers. I'm the director of the Intensive English Language Institute inside the Department of Languages, Philosophy, and Communication Studies. These are my colleagues, and I guess they'll just introduce themselves as they come up. So today we just want to give sort of a lay of the land, give you guys some insights into English language learners, some of their characteristics, who they are, how we support them, to hopefully give you guys some ideas how you can interact and support English language learners in your classrooms. And so we'll start by, I'll just start and give you guys a quick overview of English language learners. Okay, who they are, talk about language proficiency, and then talk a little bit about what we do, again, to give you guys some insights. So, first of all, ELLs, English language learners. So,
excuse me, we can't hear in Vernal, we can't hear.
Testing. Thank you.
Thank you.
How did you do? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick synopsis of the intro then. We're just going to give you guys a very brief summary of English language learners, talk about the ways that we have worked with them for many years, and to give you guys some ideas of how you can interact, support English language learners in your classroom. Okay, so English language learners, and this is a very broad category, talking about a very diverse group of people. Okay, so we can start with, we have domestic students here whose native language is not English. Okay, I think this semester I talked to the admissions people, and I think about 200 students, we had 200 students in the fall enrollment that classified themselves as non-native speakers of English. Okay, so these are, the generation 1.5, the dreamers that we hear so much about in the news, citizens, residents, refugees. Okay, a very diverse group. These students, a lot of them speak very fluently. You wouldn't know that they're English language learners. We have a few English language learners on our panel here, in fact. So you wouldn't know that their native language is not English, unless you teach a writing class. And then oftentimes their writing is very similar to the way they speak. Fluent, but not of the academic genre. Okay, they might not have the study skills, they might not be good readers. A lot of research suggests that, what's most important for academic success at the university is how many books parents have around the house, how much parents engage in reading. Okay, so if students haven't had this experience in their homes, or possibly if they've been mainstreamed into an English language class in high school, they might not ever sit in a class with other American students. They might just be taken through, graduate from high school without any mainstream classes. They're taking all ESL classes. Okay, so these students really don't have the language tools, the academic tools. Okay, and when I say language tools, I'm talking about academic language tools. I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so that's one group of English language learners. Sorry. Right button. What's that?
Right button, but left and right.
Just clicking.
The arrows.
I'm doing the arrows now. Can you show? Do that? Okay, and then the other group is international students. Now we work with both groups in our institute. We work largely with international students, but we do have some domestic students. And at Utah State University, where we have about 900 international students at any one time, a large percentage percentage of them are direct admits. Okay, they don't come through our program. They demonstrate language proficiency. There's a number of ways. Standardized tests such as the TOEFL, the IELTS are two of the biggest tests. They might have taken classes at another university in the United States. There's different ways that they can meet proficiency requirements. Okay? And then we have our students that come, if they don't have the, they don't meet the English language proficiency requirements, they come through us, they are tested, and then we put them in one of 4 levels in our program. Okay? So, again, this is a very diverse group of people, and they bring different experiences, different skills, different abilities to the classroom. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about English language proficiency. When I tell people that I teach English as a second language for international students who want to study at Utah State University, what's the first question they ask me?
If they already speak English,
You're already one step ahead.
why are we admitting them if they can't speak English?
No, you're one step ahead. They're asking me about something about me. They say, what language do you speak? Right? So they think I'm teaching English to people that don't speak any English. They think I have to speak Chinese or Spanish or something. But actually, most of our students come with 7 to 8 years, 9 years of English. Okay, they've studied extensively in their countries. They have good competence in grammar, some vocabulary. Again, they don't know how to apply it to the university context. Okay, so we're very practical at the Intensive English Language Institute. You know, our students are coming to get a degree at Utah State University. In order to do so, these students have to engage with other students here and the teachers, socio-cultural discourse community. Okay? So this is a concept that I'd like to just unpack a little bit. Okay, socio means the interactive nature of language, right? They interact with texts, things that they read. They interact with other students. They interact with the teacher. Okay, they interact by writing. Okay, but there's also a cultural context that's very important to this. And that culture is that we have norms here, North American University. Right? They're coming from other cultures that have different norms, different ways of acting. Okay? And not only are we looking at the norms of the university, but as we go around to different departments, different colleges, business, the way they interact in business is very different from the way that you might do it in animal science, veterinary sciences. English is different, okay? So each of our disciplines, our domains, there's a very different way of interacting. Okay, what constitutes claims? You know, if you're writing a paper, for your class it might be very different. From your guys' classes it might be very different. Okay, so one of the things students have to learn is how to navigate these different domains. Okay, so we're talking about a very complex situation. The discourse community, again, talks about, you know, there's domain-specific vocabulary. There's domain-specific ways of interacting, the types of papers, the types of ways of working with other students. Okay, so proficiency, what happens is we get calls every now and then, oh, this student can't communicate. They don't speak English. Or this student, why do they need your program? I had a conversation with them and they were completely fluent. I could understand everything they said. Well, we're looking at preparing students for academic study. Okay, taking your classes, being successful in your classes. So it comes back to our program. We focus on preparing students to understand lectures. Now, lectures have very distinct organization. They have distinct vocabulary, discourse, you know. professors often tell students, this is important, this is going to be on the test. Your American student will catch that. International students don't always catch that. Okay, so these are some of the ways that we prepare students. We also work a lot on study skills, helping them to be good learners. Okay, students come from different cultures where participation in the class isn't as important. You sit, you take notes, and you digest the information, and then you spew it out. Okay. So there's a lot of things that we do in our program to help students to be successful. And really, that's what we're looking at. We're not looking at creating native speakers, because first of all, it's going to be very difficult unless you learn at a very young age. It's not going to happen. But we're looking at creating students, helping students be successful in the university. We track our students as soon as they finish our program into the university. Success for us is the fact that our students on the average have a 3.0 GPA 3 semesters into the university. They're successful in the university, they can understand lectures, they can read textbooks, they can write papers, they can do presentations. Do they sound like native speakers? Do they sound like me? No. But they're successful in that respect. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Marta. Oh yeah, later.
Alright, can you guys hear me?
Yes, but we can't see you.
You can't see me, alright. Okay, so my name is Marta Halaczkiewicz, and I'm a lecturer at UNI, and as you can hear, I am a language learner myself. What I wanted to talk to you about today is some of the common struggles that your language learners may have in your classrooms, and maybe a few tips how to help or support them and be successful in your classes. So I'm assuming most of you had some language learners in your classes or are anticipating that, and you've probably seen them struggle a little bit. Could I ask you what kind of struggles have you noticed, or if you've noticed any struggles with your language learners?
Syntax errors.
Syntax errors, so grammar, language, Any other things?
Paragraph structure.
So problems with writing, academic writing.
Fear of speaking.
Fear of speaking, public speaking.
Not knowing when or how to ask for help.
Or not coming for help.
Avoiding class.
Avoid-
Days if we are doing a presentation.
Just being very sick on the day of the presentation.
David said
It's happened to me so many times. I was feeling kind of sick today in the morning. Well, these are some things that my students have shared with me, and I, as a language learner, have experienced myself. And one of the things that maybe was not mentioned, but one of the most common things that my students say is understanding lectures. You know, they struggle. It's a new situation for them. It may be a new accent. Maybe they've studied in somewhere in Europe and they're used to British accent or Australian accent, and here they come and it's all American and it's so different. Maybe we don't even think about the rate of speech, and we just, we have so much to cover and we just speak. The rate of speech is really fast. You put in a lot in your lecture. And maybe the students are just overwhelmed and it's just too much information, too much input, and they just can't handle all the information that are being thrown at them, that is being thrown at them during a lecture. Another thing that my students a lot of times comment on is I'm not able to answer my professor's questions. So they are afraid to answer the question. That may be because they're stressed, because it is public speaking, or maybe they've never been called on before. They've never experienced this Socratic method, and they're not used to, having to answer in front of everybody. Or maybe they just lack the language, they don't have the right vocabulary, or they need time to think about it because it's the beginning of the semester, their first time in a new class, and they just haven't had much experience. Or maybe they feel like they're being singled out because they're a language learner. So the professor, they may feel like professor is trying to make sure that that student understands by, asking them a question. So that may be also a reason. One of the things you've mentioned was fear of public speaking, and it goes to any type of production in English, so speaking or writing. They may not have ever spoken in front of other people or in front of a class in an academic situation, or they've never written an essay or in English, and that could be very, very stressful for them because they don't have that practice simply. And then another thing that I've also found myself is, and a lot of research shows it, that students, learners, a lot of times silence themselves because they see their accent or their, the status of being a language learner as deficient. So when I came to the States, I was already an English teacher back in Poland. I'm from Poland, I don't think I said that before. And I was pretty successful, but when I came to the States, I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't participate because I just saw, oh, everybody can see my accent and they're going to think I'm dumb, or, so I silenced myself. I didn't want to participate unless I had to. So that's another issue. So these were the struggles. So let's see how we can help them. And these are things. The things I'm going to share with you are probably very good for all of your students, not just English language learners. But I think just little tweaks in your classes might help you. And these are also things that I'm using in my classes. So one of the things that you could do for your large classrooms, if you teach a 300 student class, it's a big lecture, it's not very interactive, or it's difficult to make it interactive. Maybe share slides, or record a lecture and make it available for them on Canvas. Maybe allow lecture recording during class. That's what I used to do. I used to have a little, what do you call it, recorder? I'm thinking of a Polish word. Is it just a recorder? We have cell phones now. I bought a little $10 recorder and I always put it in front of my teacher. I said, okay, if I record you, like letting the students, or letting them know that they can even do it. They may not know that it's a possibility. So just they can, rely not only on the live lecture, but they can review it later on. Another thing you could also do is share a glossary of key terms in your lecture or in the chapter that you're talking about. Maybe sharing it during, before, or after the class. Another thing, with students who seem not to be able to participate, maybe allowing extra wait time when you ask a question. And it could be as weird as 20 seconds. Ask a question, wait 20 seconds. It's hard, but it might take that long for American students and language learners to actually think up the answer. Maybe instead of asking and waiting, you could say, okay, now I'm going to give you 20 minutes to answer these questions. Or maybe turn to your partner and talk about these questions and allow a limited time so there isn't too much of a wait time for the answer. Another thing that we really practice in ELE is group work. So making sure that your students have the opportunity to meet their classmates, work together. It may be less formal than talking to a professor, and they may kind of learn the ropes from their classmates, make friendships, and maybe feel more connected and belonging in a class, in a classroom community. Another thing also is maybe posting questions for your lecture online prior to the class and having students prepare for them before class, so they're not surprised once they come to class, and maybe they'll raise the hand to answer a question when you ask a direct question. Another thing that I use a lot is online space for discussions. So you know that works for students who are shy in your class and will not speak up, but they may be doing that online. It's shy students or language learners. I was a very shy language learner, but there was no online discussion at the time when I was in college. I wish there was. There was. Human language learner moment. Oh, another thing that I also allow in my classes, if it's possible, is multiple ways of responding. So offering, a student could choose maybe responding or doing a project, completing a project, making a product in writing or in presenting. So it could be, choose, maybe submit a paper or maybe present. And just that could also allow them some mobility. Maybe they are such stressed presenters that they are just going to, they're not going to be able to say what they want to say while presenting, which is happening to me. It could be also like group discussions or short essays or video responses. Instead of standing up in front of a class, maybe allow them to record themselves and review, revise, re-record, and post it online. That could be just less stressful. Another thing that I try to do in my classes is include their culture, because a lot of, and if it makes sense, it really has to make sense. But giving a student a venue to share where they come from, what they know about, what they want others to know about their country, is also a great way for them to feel important, to gain that voice. Where they may not feel it because they're not part of the dominant culture, but when they are asked to share their culture, they suddenly open up, and it's like a student who was quiet in your class for 3 months, suddenly, but let me tell you about the foods for this, wonderful festival that we have, and this is what we can say. I don't know, you festival English, but here you give them an option. And of course, it doesn't always work out, but if you can, try and, maybe tweak your assignments to include their culture and let them share. Thank you so much. That's all I had to say. Now, Nolan Weil will talk to us about reading.
Wired up. Explode.
I did not read it.
Can everybody hear? Who's that? Remote settings?
Yes.
Vernal, etc. So unbutton this pocket so I can get that explosive device in my back. Okay. So I'm Nolan Weil. I'm associate professor in Ely, and I want to address ELL's reading challenges. The reading challenges that English language learners have, but really not just English language learners. I'm actually going to address both English language learners and those that we would consider not English language learners, that is native speakers, but they're nevertheless still English language learners. They're still learning their language. Reading, but English language learners have specific issues. Some of the reasons are that they're slow. Generally, they're slower than native speakers in being able to process a written text. I frequently collect data in my classes on how rapidly they read, and they read maybe at about half to 2/3 the rate of a native speaker on the average. That means it's going to take them a really long time to get through some of the readings that their peers just ripped through. Right? So that's one of the problems they face. The other problem they face, they have sometimes their vocabulary is not nearly as large as the vocabulary of a native speaker. Research shows that typical university student may know between 10,000 to 20,000 or more words. English language learners maybe max out at 5,000 or 6,000. So obviously, if there's a really heavy vocabulary load in their reading, that's going to slow them down. background knowledge. They may lack a lot of the background knowledge that's presumed in some of the readings that they're given, especially if it's really text, culturally bound information, or contains a lot of idiomatic expressions. That may really throw them. But I want to move on to a little case study today. I had originally planned to talk about something somewhat different today, and then I went to class today, and I taught this class, Ely 2470 and Ely 2475. And in the middle of class, I had a eureka moment. I said, why don't we talk about what's going on right now in class today? It seemed more practical than what I had been thinking about earlier. But what makes this a unique class is 2470, 75. The 2470 course number is Ely only students. The 2475 are students who are outside of Ely. It's a breadth class, serves a gen ed requirement. Ely students take it for 4 hours, and American students take it for 3. We have an extra hour for English language learners. But I have to deal with both of them, and it is a content-based class. It's a subject matter class. We're going over concepts related to culture. What is culture? What are the various concepts that constitute culture, as well as giving students the opportunity to explore one another's cultures, cross-cultural. So there's a lot of discussion that takes place in the class, but there's also a text to read. So I wear a couple of different hats in Ely, and in this particular class, I'm wearing the subject matter teacher class, subject matter teacher, and reading teacher hat in the same classroom. One of the things about ELL students is when they're reading a text and when they're having difficulty with the text, what they might do is resort to compensation strategies. They have learned in the past that I've talked about the slow reading speed. They can't get through the reading, so what is my strategy? Well, I've learned that main ideas are often the first idea. The first sentence of a paragraph often expresses the main idea. Well, if I read the first and the last, right, I'm going to get the main ideas. And then they forget about the details. They locate the main ideas, but they're blind to the importance of details. And they don't understand the need to reduce the text to something like keywords and keyword phrases. So in class today, I found that maybe I want to go to my next. Well, my slides are a little bit out of order, but I'll just talk about this. One of the things that I think that we can do in classes when we expect students to be able to gather information from texts is to give them a little bit of a clue as to how texts are structured. This is where the peers of English language learners, their native speaker peers, can also benefit from that, because frankly, I find that they don't quite know how texts are structured either. They plunge in at the beginning of a text, and they just they read it fluently, they read it right through, and they don't do anything more with it. When they're done reading it, they're done. We can point out to them that, you know, a text consists of, there are many different structures in a text. I can't go over all of them. I'm sure you can all think of some of them too. There's definitions and examples. There are descriptions. There are classifications. Cause and effect sequences. comparisons and contrasts, and a whole host of other different text structures that we can alert them to. How can we do that? I'm going to try to open it. So this is the text for ELE 2470. I actually participated in an open educational resource project, so I actually wrote the text. And that's kind of nice because then you can create a text that works well for your students and that folds in some of the characteristics that you would like to emphasize with your students. I put at the beginning of every text this suggested focus, and you see that you see it in a lot of standard text. They may put objectives, right? They'll put a series of objectives in the text, or a series of questions that you hope the student would be able to answer when they finish the text. Doing that gives them some sense of what it is that they should be looking for when they read the text. So I gave this to my students in 2470, 2475, and I said, pay attention to the suggested focus. And it says right here, the following task will help you gain a better grasp of some commonly mentioned elements of culture. Define the following terms, and for each term provide the following information. And if you look at the list of things, it's sort of a sequence of various text structures that they can expect to find within the text. Oh, by the way, there might be a pop quiz. And I'm hoping to give them some incentive to actually read the text, because really what I want to do when they come into class is have a discussion about it. And you all are familiar with the situation where you hope they'll read the text because you want to discuss it, and then they come to class and they haven't discussed it. But I kind of know that's going to happen. Use of visual representations is the next topic. So I've asked them to read the text. They come into class, I put them into groups, and I give them this. And they're kind of mystified by it. What's this table? Really, this table is nothing more than that red box that they saw that they were supposed to go over and maybe take your conventional, traditional notes on a piece of notebook paper, write down all the points. I put them in groups and asked them to discuss it. And these happen to be the topics of the day. They had to define belief, value, norm, custom, tradition, ritual, basic definition, types, differences where they're relevant, an example from the text, and a unique example. And so they went, it was supposed to be a discussion, right? And some of them were discussing, and others were obviously seeing it for the first time, but they were actually engaging with the material and going through the text and picking out the information. And I asked them, finally, how many are glad that I didn't give you a pop quiz, right? And almost all of them were really happy. I think I've gone over my time. I'm getting the watch. Text structure, visual representations, opportunity to work together in groups, in class, with the material.
My name is Elena Shrico, and I'm an assistant professor in the EU program. And I'm relatively new to the university. I only started last year in January. And I wanted to talk about how to use resources, university resources, and maybe even local resources in your community in your classes to help English language learners. And our school, as many schools in the nation obviously, has a lot of resources, programs, support systems to help English language learners. But sometimes students may not be aware of those programs and those resources because, sometimes they're coming from different cultures and, schools are very different. I know it was, the case for me, and it took me a while to figure out how the university system works here. And, in my home city, all universities were just one building. So it took me a while to understand, how this works and why we have so many buildings on campus and what those buildings are. So it might be different in their own countries. Sometimes they also may feel a little bit intimidated by all of this, new environments and, different contexts. I heard from students that they feel really intimidated to go to the library because they feel scared to go there because it's just very different. It's maybe very different academic context. Sometimes students feel that all of those resources are not created for them, and they may feel like they're like guests here, and everything else that they see around is just for American students or for local students, and it's not applicable for them. And honestly, a lot of those, new things that come, like especially the first year, they have to deal with so many different things. We talk a lot about culture shock, and of course, it's a very real concept, and it does exist, and sometimes it does have really serious consequences. And sometimes, even academic expectations are very different. I remember my first semester in my first college class. After we turned our first homework assignment, we just came to class, and I honestly just wanted to compare my answers with my classmates. Honestly, I wouldn't do it at this point because I have a different mentality now. But he just said, I'm not going to show you my responses. And I thought he was being really rude, and he thought I was being really rude. So it's just very different expectations because in my home culture, we do that all the time. That's what we do. We come to class and we compare our answers before we turn homework assignments to our teachers. So it may be very different. So a lot of those things that they have to deal their first semester, especially with culture shock, cross-cultural misunderstanding, and sometimes even financial difficulties, sometimes trying to, adjust to this, whole new culture. One of my students last semester, he came up to me after class and he said, I just still feel like I'm not fitting here. And he has been here for 2.5 years. He went to high school here, but he just feels like he doesn't fit. And I said, so what are some problems? And he said, I don't know. I just feel like I'm not fitting. And honestly, I still cannot get used to food. So even as simple as food and nutrition can be a problem for students. Sometimes it's visa problems. So a lot of those things they have to deal with those things. So they may have no time and no energy to even explore those resources that we have. And that might not be only true for international students, but also for domestic students. One time I taught a first-year composition class in the spring semester, and my students said, my American students, domestic students, they said, we wish we knew all of those. We knew about all of those resources our first semester in the fall semester. So sometimes they're just not familiar, and there is a reason, obviously, why we do have this orientation at the beginning of the fall semester. So honestly, we may be the ones who can help students, to become familiar with those resources and to feel comfortable, because this is very important for their language learning skills as well. Because Second language acquisition is not just the development of linguistic skills, but it's also the development of pragmatic skills, social skills, and cultural skills, and it is important for them to become more integrated into this environment and to feel comfortable and to socialize into this community. And I also have a slide here that shows the interdependence of language and context. So language, as we know, is a possessor of social capital, cultural capital, all of those resources, and gives students a chance to become more integrated into this environment. But at the same time, as they become more integrated into this environment, as they socialize, their language development is growing, right? So they do acquire more sophisticated language forms. So it is very important, even from that perspective, to help them, become more familiar with these resources and to become a part of this community. So, as I said, it may not be fair to shift all this duty and responsibility onto the students. So how can we use those resources in our classes? So very simple way is just to introduce those resources in your classes where it's applicable. Tell students, well, there is a writing center and you can go there and you can get help with your academic learning. Or there is a library and you can go to the library and you can get a help, trying to find academic sources and meet with the person who knows about library databases, different sources, or get a book from interlibrary loan, get an electronic book. Or there's an academic success center, and you can get a lot of help there, how to take tests, or how to prepare for a test, or how to become a better learner. So that's just one way, just simply introducing those resources when it's applicable. A more subtle way would be maybe inviting guest speakers to your classes. For example, last semester I had a person from the Academic Success Center, and he just gave an amazing lecture on how to take tests and different test-taking strategies, and students really enjoyed that. So maybe inviting those guest speakers to your classes would be another way of introducing those resources to students. And then the final way would be to actually implement those resources and programs and services into your classes. And I'm going to share one example of how I did that last semester in my class in Ely. So I taught, and I do realize that your classes may be a little bit different from this class, but I just kind of wanted to give you an idea what you can do maybe in your courses, in your classes. So I taught a cross-cultural communication and spoken discourse class, which is basically a speaking class that helps students to develop their oral communication skills. And I wanted my students to become more familiar with the USU resources and use those resources in my class. So I had 5 major, larger units in this class, in this course. So the first one was called Building a Learning Community. And the project for that class was the group profile. So students had to present their group, and they worked in groups for the whole semester. So this class was based on group work. So they had to present their group profile in front of the class. Some students chose to do a skit, or some students did a photo slideshow. So the genre was very different, the deliverable was very different. And then our second project, or our second unit was education. And for that unit, we worked, and talked about education. So I also forgot to mention that for each unit, we had 3 weeks to work. For the first week, we kind of build up the background knowledge. So we, did some readings, we did some, listening. We worked with words and vocabulary to kind of help students to get that material, that background knowledge that would help them to successfully, talk about this topic, this material. And for the second week, this is where we kind of narrowed it down a little bit, the context, kind of zoomed in. And so, for example, for the unit education, we talked about our campus, the university. And for the third week of that unit, the students were working on their project and also they presented the project. So for the unit education, we narrowed down to our campus and we talked about different resources and services that we have at the university. And it's called Exploring USU. So the students had to prepare a formal PowerPoint presentation talking about those resources. Then for the next project, for the next unit on globalization, we narrowed that down to our city, Logan, and we talked about whether or not Logan is experiencing this process of globalization. And for that unit, the students had to hold a discussion, being like a leader of the group discussion, and they had to present their argument whether or not Logan is in fact experiencing globalization, and they had to provide different pieces of evidence to support their claim. Then for the fourth unit, the environment, we zoomed in to our state of Utah, which obviously has a lot of resources. So the students for this project, they had to make a poster, on one national park in Utah, talking about, about different, efforts from the government to, support that park and different environmental protection efforts. And for the final project of the class, fashion and styles, we zoomed in, or we talked about the whole nation, right? And the students had to present an actual outfit that American people wear to certain social situations, and that was kind of interesting for them as well because they did some observations, they had some surveys on campus, and they gave them a list of those social situations where they had to present a certain type of clothing and outfits. So you can see that each of these units took the students on a certain level. So we started with the community, the class community, and then we moved down to the university, and then to the city level, and then to the state level, and then to the whole nation. So I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I wanted to emphasize, maybe the university. But in each of those projects, I did in fact use the university resources. For example, for the first one, when we did talk about our classroom community, because a lot of our students are coming from Asia, and I did a lot. I had a lot of students, from China in that class. I brought a guest speaker from the Asian Association, and she talked about different programs and events that we have. But for the second project, when the students had to explore our campus, there were 4 groups in our class, or 4 teams, and each of the teams had to explore a certain type of resources. So right here, the first group, they explored academic and professional resources, and I only gave them the definition of the resources of the group. For example, I said, you have to explore all the resources that help you succeed academically on campus and also prepare you as a future professional. And all of those examples are actually coming from their project, so this is what they found and they presented at the class. So another group was exploring social and cultural resources on campus. Then another group talked about athletic and recreational resources, and then the final one explored student services. So they all, went out and they started honestly from the website because that's the easy way to start. So they looked at all of this, like library, writing center, career fair, special lectures and workshops and seminars. So they became really familiar with the calendar that we have on campus or on the website, the different events calendar. So they looked at all of those things that were available. But then, after exploring that on the website, they actually went out, and I gave them some time in class. And some of them went to the library. Some of them went to the cabs and talked with the staff members there. So this is what they found, and they presented that in class as their presentation. And then For the next one, the Logan in the era of globalization, I wanted to emphasize that project as well because it really just opened their eyes and they look at our city from a different angle because they didn't realize perhaps that even in this small town we have this interconnectedness of cultures and businesses and all of those things, and it really opened their eyes that our city is in fact experiencing globalization. And for one project, for example, also they did like different things. I asked them. Yes, I also had 4 groups, and they had to explore a certain category. And for example, this group, they had to explore like food, like local restaurants, and grocery stores, and see if Logan is experiencing globalization in that particular category. And then also had businesses, and social life, and education and religion. But to prepare students for their projects, I also scaffolded them throughout like those 2 weeks. And for example, they went for one of their homework assignments. They had to go to a local grocery store and take pictures of things that kind of represent globalization. And students went out and they found things products from Japan or products from Taiwan or Thailand. And also remember that I found in local smiths, I found like cookies that were made in Japan, but they were made in the form of like little burgers, and they're like really cute, and I brought them to class, and I showed them, and I said, hey, this is an example of globalization. This is how it works. So anyway, they really enjoyed this, and they became really comfortable with the different resources here. So once again, I do realize that your classes may be very different, but I wanted to kind of give a general maybe implication or suggestions. So it doesn't have to be a full-fledged project in your class, trying to incorporate those resources. But it can also be like a simple homework assignment, or maybe even class activity, or something else. For example, when I noticed that my students were not familiar with the library and they don't know how to find sources, I created like a library scavenger hunt. So I gave them the titles of the books, and I asked them to go to the library and find that book on the shelf and take a picture and bring it to class. Or I would give them like a call number, and they had to go to the library and find that book on the shelf and take a picture, or take a picture of that book that's next to them. So there are lots of different ways how you can help your students to integrate into this, academic community, and I think it is important for us to, cultivate this desire to, to integrate with the academic and social and cultural affordances in our university.
Okay. Oh, hi, my name's Taira Nieves. I'm from Honduras, and I'm a lecturer in Ely as well. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit. We've been talking a lot about how we can provide academic support for our students, and I think I have the most fun part. I get to talk about how we provide interpersonal support to our students inside and outside of the classroom. So, how many of you have actually been to another country, not just for travels, but maybe to study for a certain amount of time? Was it your native language? No? Where did you go? Germany? Did you know German? No?
Colombia.
Colombia? Spanish?
Oh, a mix.
Poquito?
Yeah.
So if you have, you know how nerve-wracking it is to already kind of speak the language, kind of not, maybe depend on an app like I have when I go to China. I have my Say Hi app that I can just type or speak into, and thank God we are in that era now where we have that kind of technology. But that's just when I travel. Imagine going to study. You know you're going to be immersing yourself in a different culture. We've talked about the difficulties that students have with the food, with the environment, with a campus that is very spread out, that it's not all one central building. So they have all these challenges that they're facing. And they're coming alone. You don't have their parents coming with them, right? They're here alone. Yes, they might be coming with some friends, but they're just as lost as they are. So a lot of times for these students, we, their teachers, are their very first introduction, their gateway, their support system. We're their parents when they come. And at least for our classes in Ely, because we do have such small groups in our classes, we get to know them on an extremely personal level. And every day, you know, we get to interact with them and we get to teach them. But as the semester goes on, because we do get to know them and we become their parents in a way, they start to learn how to navigate this new culture that they're in. Not only academically, but socially. So it's really important for us to remember that we're their first support that they have when they get here. Because in other countries, they're used to their parents doing something. They're used to administrators doing something for them. So it's their first time really on their own that they have to live life, really. And I'll touch on that in a minute. So there are different ways that our students, the international students, are used to communicating with their teachers. Okay, for example, most of us that come from different countries, the relationships that we had with our teachers, there was this huge barrier between us. That was the teacher, I'm the student, there's a lot of respect involved. You know, you might notice the eye contact, the lack of eye contact in the classroom. Well, sometimes that can't even happen outside of the classroom. It's like, that's still your teacher. If I see you at Starbucks and you're my teacher, you know, I might have the nerve to come up and be like, hey, you know, how are you? But not our international students. Until they build that relationship with you, then they can feel that they can do that. So they have to get over that image of authority that you have over them and start to feel that you're their friend. You're there to help them. Yes, you teach them, but you also are there to help them. One of my biggest compliments that I get a lot of times, and I've gotten it a lot actually in the last 2 weeks, is that I'm a tough teacher, but I'm their best friend at the same time. So inside the classroom, they know that I demand a lot from them. But outside the classroom, they know that I'm the first person that they can contact. And I'll touch on that a little later. I'm going a little out of order right now. But office hours. A lot of universities outside of the United States don't really enforce office hours. So our students aren't accustomed to you saying, if you have any questions, come see me during my office hours. That doesn't exist. A, because a lot of teachers don't have an office. They have a teacher's lounge where students can go and maybe go in and talk to them. And a lot of times they'll just address questions or bombard the teachers either right before class or right after class. And here at Utah State, we all know we have about 10 to 15 minutes to get from one class to another, from one building on campus to the other side. So that doesn't leave a lot of room for questions and answers between teachers and students. So this is something that is new for a lot of our students, the concept of holding office hours. Another thing that they don't do a lot of is actually email their professors. There are some students when they first arrive in Ely where you say, if you have any questions, send me an email. Well, because some of that is a little foreign to them, I'll get my whole message in the subject section of the email, right? They're asking you the whole question just on the subject line instead of in the body, because it's just not something they do. You don't contact your teacher through email, not because of lack of technology, but it's just not a common practice. Learning management systems. Here at Utah State, we use Canvas a lot. Some teachers post everything on Canvas. I do, some teachers don't. But the concept of having a learning management system as a way for students to keep track of the material, keep track of their grades, have discussion boards, collaborations, things like that. It's not commonly done in other universities. So navigating this is also different. So if you're one of those teachers that says, if you have a question, contact me through Canvas, or look at Canvas for your assignments, it'll take some time for them to get used to it. Of course, all these things they do learn to do, once they've been in Utah State for a while. And that's something that we all do teach a little bit in all of our classes in Ely, is how to get used to all these different methods of communicating with us, their teachers. So this is one that I happen to use a lot with my students. These are two different chat groups, applications on our phones that we can download and use for our students. WeChat is used a lot in China and in some of the Asian countries. And WhatsApp is used in really all over the world. So for me, the first few days of class, because I have this anyways, I will, for the WeChat, it's really easy because they have a QR code. Maybe I should show you. I should have taken a picture. Thanks. So I have this really nifty QR code. So I'll ask all my students that have WeChat to just go ahead and scan my code. So they scan it, and they start adding me as a friend, and I add them as a friend, and then I create a group chat for it with our class. And because this is something that they use on a day-to-day basis for everything, it's very easy to communicate. Them with me and me with them as a class and as individuals. So I'll post reminders about homework on WeChat or WhatsApp. Or if one of them has a question, they'll text the question. And either I or other students that might know the answer will go ahead and answer the question. And you might think that it's very time consuming, or that you are attached too much to your phone if you allow this to open up in your classrooms with your students, and especially if you have, over 50, 100 students. But not everyone uses it. They might read it, but not everyone even participates in it. And of course, you would set the times that you are available. I have a student who loves texting me at 2 a.m. He knows he won't get a response from me. But come 7 a.m., I will. I don't have a problem with that. I'm already up. So you would set the guidelines of when you're available, when you'll reply, when you'll not. And you might see that students start answering the questions for each other. And again, I use these more as just a small introduction for them to start getting comfortable with us, getting comfortable with the whole system. Sometimes it's not even academic questions that they ask. A lot of times, we've all had students in and out of our offices crying over something or sharing exciting news, births, engagements, or breakups, problems with roommates. And we're all there to offer a support. How do you deal with this situation? I had a student last semester that was having a really hard time with her roommate. She didn't know how to get out of her contract. She honestly didn't even know she had signed a contract. She said when she got here, yes, she signed a lot of papers, but she didn't know that that was a binding contract. She didn't know that if she got out, she couldn't just leave the apartment. She was still responsible to pay. So there's all these legal matters that come into play that they're just not aware of because they don't deal with it when they're at home. Someone else does it for them. So a lot of times we're the ones that help them with that. And as the semester continues, as they are here for longer and they start to build relationships with other people, because that's the other fun thing about these apps is they start to blend in with each other. They start to get to know each other. They start to get comfortable with each other. And because they've done it in a safe space, online, in an invisible universe, we start to see them gel closer together in class. They're not as afraid to ask questions. They're not as afraid to participate in the classroom because they have a space where they've gotten to know each other and maybe ask questions that they wouldn't be comfortable asking in class, but they did it in a way that helped them save face, help them not get embarrassed, help them lower their affective filters. So that's one of the things that you can do if you choose to provide support. And all this to say that we do have a positive impact on our students inside and outside the classroom. The type of relationship that we have with our students impacts them. And that goes for both international and domestic students. Before I started teaching in Ely, I taught in the Spanish department. And of all my students were American, and I still get texts or emails once in a while from students remembering a time where, you know, I replied to something that was personal, helped them along, and it made a difference. So we do. I'm sure that you all have stories of students that you've helped along the way. It's a scary time. It wasn't too long ago. So that's my bit about providing support for students. And then
Can you hear me? What's up? Okay, so I'll try to be fast. I guess everybody's already so tired, right? So we're gonna switch gears again, and we will talk about what happens when students actually become teachers. And we'll talk about ITAs, International Teaching Assistants. So the graduate students who come here and they help you in your class, right? And sometimes they can even take over and hold office hours for you or even teach a class. And I was curious, how relevant is this topic to you? Do you have TAs in your classes, international TAs? And maybe what kind of experiences you had, any challenges with this group? Nobody ever had this kind of students?
We certainly do in our department. I don't in my particular class.
Oh, so you have, can you share something?
No, in the fall, I
Okay.
have a student that wants to work with me in Korea, and I've been working with him in my class just one-on-one helping him, and he wants to take my class over the summer, so he would be my TA in the fall.
Oh, okay, so that's something you're expecting to happen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so at least it's relevant to someone. Well, anyway, what we do is we offer some sociocultural, linguistic, and instructional orientation to new graduate students coming from all kinds of countries. And the major thrust, they come from India and they're doing masters in computer science. I think that's a very hot topic these days. And the other, they come from China, from South Korea, from Russia, where I come from. So we have some diversity there too. And yeah, so what kind of challenges the students have? I think some of them are very similar to what everybody else touched upon. So that would be like, there. Yeah, so linguistic challenges, of course, sociocultural and instructional, that would be something different because they're all of a sudden they become teachers, right? Or they hold office hours or they do some grading for their professors. So let's talk about the instructional challenges. And I think, again, some of that was covered. So if you come from a culture, like from my home culture, the way professors teach is a little different. So yeah, there's a lot of lecturing and not so much interaction. So we try to raise awareness of these differences and sharing strategies how to make your classroom more interactive. And then another one is with grading. So for example, here, if you take a science class, a math, physics class, and you solve a problem and the answer is, I don't know, like 10, right? The answer is 10. And if you give an incorrect answer, 8, right? So in Russia, you don't get any point for that, right? It's just 0. But in America, I think professors tend to be more encouraging, and they would go through the solution that the student gave and would give you some points, right? Even if the answer is incorrect, but he was going the right direction to get to there, they will give you some points. Yeah, so that's, and a lot of the students, they just grade for their professors, and I think it's, it can be, even it's a simple thing, but it can be quite a different experience for them. And then linguistic challenges, again, some of them, that would be kind of a little opposite, because some of them are they're experts in their disciplines, they know the discourse for their, I don't know, it's math or physics, but they may struggle with conversation, like regular conversation. And for example, office hours, right? The students may use some idioms or some slang, and that, or they may use incomplete sentences, right? And that can be something, challenging for those students. And what we do in the workshop, we do some role plays. So one student would be like
TA, right, and the other would be a student, and I give them some scripts and scenarios so they can role play before that actually happens. And then another advice I give them is not to stick just to people from your community, right? So kind of open your mind to seeking friends from other cultures. It doesn't have to be American, right? It can be other cultures and they still can practice English. Yeah, and another problem is sociocultural. So again, the concept of office hours, I think like Taira and maybe Marta actually talked about this. In some cultures, professors are so overwhelmed with work or like there are, for other reasons, they don't have office hours, right? So that's, they don't even, they didn't hear about this before. So we talk about what it is and I give them some language that they can use in those office hours, right? And another one is relationship, like with your advisor, right? So they are graduate student, they have advisor, whether it's master's or doctoral program. So here relationships, I think they tend to be more informal. And they can be simple things like how you address your advisor. You go by doctor or something, or you call, what do you do? And for me, because I was in their place, right, when I was an international graduate student, I struggled. I think I even now, I don't think I can call my advisor by first name. Maybe it's a small thing, but it's difficult. Because in Russia, there is, I think, kind of emphasis more formality and more like distance. And yeah, power difference. Yeah, and raising, I don't think I can solve all of those problems, right, for them, but raising awareness, I think that can help. And then again, some of our students are very successful. They get best TA awards in their departments and they compete with native speakers, right, for that. So it's not international best TA award, it's in the whole department. Or I had one student that he got a tenure track job at a different university with a teaching focus. So I think it's not all because of us, right, but we still, I think we help them be successful. And then, yeah, the last thing, looking at, now we are working on creating OER, open educational resources for the students. So this would be some kind of instructional videos and podcasts and some guidelines, like some text, right, like a manual for the students that even after they take the workshop or before can work either way, there's some place that they go and they can get to know about the workshop and about teaching at Utah State and in American University. Yeah, and I think I was super fast. Yeah, but I hope it. Yeah.
When are your workshops offered? Each semester, at the beginning or throughout the semester? And are they open to all international graduate students that would be teaching?
Yeah, and I think maybe Jim can help me on this. He's been here longer. As far as I know, we offer it in the summer, like in the beginning of the fall semester, end of August, and then in the fall twice. And nothing in the spring. Yeah, and it's offered to all international graduate students who plan to become TAs or who are required to become TAs. Yeah, and can you add?
Yeah, it's offered the last 2 weeks before the fall semester begins, like middle of August or so. So we wanted to open it up to other just general questions too. Does anybody have questions that they want to ask? Maybe have a discussion here.
I have a question about English, the second language program. Is it offered only to students, or I have several, postdoctoral fellows and visiting scholar, could they attend this type of courses? So because some of them been in this country for a long time, they're excellent, doing excellent technical work and good writing, but their communication might be still lagging behind.
So visiting scholars and
postdoctoral fellows.
okay. Did you guys hear the question in the back? Yeah. Okay. Great. So any student enrolled at USU, I'm not sure the status of postdoctoral fellows. We used to offer our classes to visiting scholars, but HR says we can't anymore.
Okay.
So it's only open to students. Now, I'm not sure how postdocs are classified.
Because I'm thinking if they are full time, if they employed,
If they're employed, then that's probably
they
not.
could
Yeah, we do offer one course, it's more of a conversational course that's open to graduate students, the spouses of graduate students, and also visiting scholars and postdocs.
Jim, can they audit?
We used to allow them to audit in the past, but
But one thing is a USU employee, they, you know, if you allow them time to take a class, they could take it through the.
well, it depends on their status.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if, because we do have visiting scholars that have audited their class in the past, but depending on how they're classified. So you'd have to talk to HR. Because they're not full employees, full benefit employees.
Since I thought if you employed by Lucas, you could audit any class, like I could audit a class, but as long as the third one allowed.
It depends on their benefits, because this is just something that recently changed.
Or that.
We used to have quite a few.
Thank you.
Other, yeah.
English students, this is my understanding, when I had some students that were English language learners, but they weren't in the EMI program, so they really couldn't go to get help there, right? But you have to be in the EMI program to take those classes.
What type of help are you thinking of?
Well, I teach composition writing. So what I'm saying is usually students that come to Utah State in the ELI program, aren't they enrolled through their being enrolled, maybe a company sent them or a country sent them or something, but they are paying to be in the ELI program, whereas other students maybe are just here on campus and need help. Now I know this semester we've received a lot of emails with lots of opportunities for people to go, which I think is wonderful. But I mean, usually people can't just go to the ELI program to get help, right? It's a little bit different than that.
Yeah, we have, obviously we have smaller classes, so we do a lot of one-on-one with our students.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So they kind of need to be in that program. But this semester, you aren't offering some great classes.
Yeah, Elaine was doing. You might
Yeah,
want to
which I
speak to
think
that.
that's wonderful because in the past I've had students and it's like where do you send them? They can't really just go to the EMI program because that's its own program.
Well, they can come to our teachers and maybe get some help in terms of, maybe directing them to a certain, once again, like resource or certain website. We have a lot of resources, all of us do.
Okay, so you could send them there for research.
Absolutely. And also this semester, and hopefully we will continue that maybe next year as well, we do offer writing workshops for English language learners. So once a month on the third Thursday of the month, one was today, we talked about academic sources and how to write academic articles and how to implement those sources. So next one will be on March 15th. So if you have any questions, you can email us. We can send you informations with flyers, with the descriptions of those workshops. So I think it's really helpful for those students. Also, part of this seminar, I'm not sure if you look at the website, the ETE website, but they also posted a link a couple of days ago to a lot of resources for teachers and students. So it's a Google Doc link. It will take you to a Google folder with 2 other folders, resources for teachers and resources for students. So you can just access that through the ETU website, and you can see what kinds of resources you can use to give it to your students. But they can also come and to our offices, and we'll be happy to help them as well.
I just didn't know if we should send them there or if that's kind of like if they're not part of that.
They probably cannot sit in our classes, but we can help them in our office hours.
We've all done it at some point.
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
sure.
And just to add one more thing is any student can take an ELI course too. So even students often don't want to pay for the extra class, but if you have a student that's, for example, having problems writing, you can send them over and they could actually take out a course. Other questions?
Dr. Well discussed some note-taking strategies that you give your college students. I work in research on we're looking at note-taking. Do you feel like the dual language learners do you feel like they have sufficient knowledge in different note-taking strategies? in the courses, or just how well do you delve into that topic?
Note taking.
Yeah, note taking.
Related to reading.
Yes, really true.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we teach, just sort of conventional note taking, reading through the text and picking out the important points sort of in a linear way. But one of the things, and I didn't have enough time to talk about it, but that table that I showed at the end was one form of visual representation. And there are other forms of visual representation that using graphic means and arrows and keywords to link particular topics and subjects together that research shows really enhances the comprehension of a text. So if you're aiming to give students an activity to do that's going to deepen their understanding of the text, use of visual representation is a really good way to go about it. But maybe a lot of teachers, if they haven't worked with visual representation, you have to do a lot of work up front to you have to examine a lot of texts yourself, and you have to practice it a lot yourself to develop some chops of your own before you can start teaching them. But I really highly recommend becoming familiar with visual representation and how to use it in the classroom, because I think it's a really powerful way of teaching students really how to think about the structure, not just the content, but the structure of the text and how the different parts of it. I don't know if that answered all your questions or not. Any other questions? For anybody?
I guess we'll wrap it up. We talked about English language learners, but I think the takeaway here is really the complexity these language learners. It's not just simply language. Language is a very, very complex topic, right? We talked about culture today. We talked about social situation, background knowledge required. So, it's a tough job for these students. For our program, we give them the tools, but it's a trajectory. I mean, we have, English language learners here on the panel, and we're very fluent now, but it didn't start this way. So it's been over the years that they've developed. And the same thing with our students. We give them the tools, but it's really a process of development.
It's a long term.
Not that long.
Long term. I'm still learning myself.
Any other comments from you guys?
Jim, maybe just to add one resource that not we, but from the Writing Center, they have the conversation groups. I think it's on Wednesdays.
Tea time.
Oh, yeah, tea time. It's called Tea Time. They have some cookies and tea, and also they discuss different topics. So if you feel like your students, maybe struggle with, oral communication skills or even learning about different topics, you can tell them. I'm not sure where exactly they are held in education. Oh, okay, so in the Writing Center. So every Wednesday from 3:30 to 4:30, so they can just go there and talk about different topics and get some vocabulary and just practice their oral skills.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.